Welcome to What Makes You Tick Best Bits. If you hire salespeople, this episode is for you. It's 20 minutes from one of my favorite ever episodes that we've done with Brent Holloway, where we talked all about go-to-market Moneyball strategies. If you've seen the film, you'll love the episode. I'll put a link in the show notes. But this section's all about hiring. Brent brings his experience of scaling sales teams from 7 to 70 million ARR all the way through to IPO in a few different companies that you would definitely recognize. So his own experience and how he did it, how he approached interviews, how he approached assessments, how he built world-class teams that scaled by 10x. And I bring my experience as a former revenue leader and also now working with clients as a specialist sales recruiter. So if you're hiring people on resumes, you're indexing over on experience, but you're failing, you're missing attitudes, you're missing behaviors, people aren't getting results, then there's probably some science that you can bring in. There's some systems you can bring in. There's some things that you can learn that will dramatically reduce the risk of those hiring decisions. I think in this 20 minutes, you're going to take a load of value that you can plug into your own systems to get better hiring results. So without further ado, let's roll the BT.
So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of, as businesses grow, that complexity grows and things that they get right. What are some of the things that have been real highlights for you in your career around scaling businesses successfully? Just what are some of those highlights?
So I feel like I've been really fortunate to work with some great recruiters. It wasn't always linear. Like there was times I can remember at Talon where perhaps it was because of a round of funding or perhaps shortly after the IPO that we had to scale faster, right? You take this investment, whether it's a VC investment or, a private, going private and the cash that you raise from that, there's growth expectations. And so I was fortunate to work with some great recruiters. We had internal programs for referrals. We found that referrals were the best in terms of like the results that we got from the people that came by way of referrals, the longevity of people that came by way of referrals. And it wasn't, so yeah, I think just as a kind of a takeaway there, I would recommend if you don't already have one, an internal referral program, because the few $1,000s or whatever you might offer as a bonus there is like relatively inexpensive. With that said, both internal and external recruiters, they did a great job to help us scale quickly. And it's hard, right? It's one thing when you're hiring one or two people, you can be very selective. You can invest a lot of time in it. But if you're a sales leader that has to hire 10 people in the next 2 months while balancing aggressive growth goals and helping your existing team, it's really, really hard. And in that scenario, if you don't have great recruiters, you're going to struggle. You're going to take your eye off the ball from all the other things that you need to do. So a lot of appreciation for what people like you do, Richard.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I've definitely tried to systemize a lot of this because it is this thing that a lot of people wing it, I mean, in sales, you talked about winging it. There's a lot more process and a lot more effort that goes into the inputs that drive the outputs in sales than there is in hiring. If I hear one more person say they want me to find them an A-player rock star, and then I ask them what that means, I think I might go crazy. So absolutely, I think that getting the people right is so fundamental, and there is ways of systemizing that to go and de-risk it from both sides, because like why I believe that A player is this silly saying is because it's like saying there's a group of A players and then everyone else is B's and C's. But if you put the right person in the wrong environment, they'll become a B or a C player if there's not alignment, or maybe it's an enterprise sales cycle and they're a mid-market rep, or it's into a completely different industry, or whatever that looks like. But there aren't people that are successful in every single business. It's just not the case. Particularly if you're scaling, you won't have a whole group of just absolute top multipliers. You've got a varying group of capabilities and skill set. And I think the real job of a great sales leader is, with what I've got, how do I get the absolute most from them? Because they're all different, right? They're human beings at the end of the day. So we're trying to like manage humans in a way that like we manage machines. Right. And I still believe that AI won't take over sales just yet. So when you're hiring for salespeople or sales leaders, maybe we look at those both separately. Like, what are some of the things that you look for that have added up to fantastic people?
Yeah. So a couple things come to mind here. The phrase humble, hungry, and smart comes to mind. right? Some level of humility, hungry. They're motivated for whatever their reasons are. But it's sales is tough. You're going to have a lot of rejection. You're going to have some up and down quarters. Even if you're successful, very few people do it quarter after quarter. So you want to know that there's some underlying motivation, and then smart, right? Like there's some ways to assess, being quick on their feet and being able to, do quantification of math and business cases and those types of things. So humble, hungry, and smart is kind of a framework that I think about. Some level of a track record of success, not necessarily against quota. Of course, that's an obvious one, but relative to their peers. I've seen some scenarios, especially in startups, where you're talking to a candidate that was at 88% of his or her number, but they were the top 1 or 2 out of 12 people on their team. So I think you got to look at it both in terms of percentage of quota and percentage of peer group performance. And then coachability is another big one. So I've hired over 100 people using a fairly specific role play process for later stage candidates. And it's really good for a couple of reasons. You get a rough sense for how they're going to represent themselves in our business in a discovery call. We also do a mock negotiation. So you get a sense for, how are they going to come to a win-win outcome in a fairly uncomfortable situation. It's a high pressure scenario. And then perhaps the best part of that role play is the coachability. So you'll give them some feedback. Are they defensive about it? Do they accept it? You might even give them a tip that they can then apply towards a later part of the role play, so that you can assess coachability. And Mark Roberge, he's one of the guys that I follow. He's got a lot of great talks on YouTube and SaaStr. He talks about having taken a very scientific approach to measuring what are the traits that are most highly correlated with success in sales. And his number one was coachability. And so that really stuck with me, and I think it's spot on. And to some degree, it is measurable. And for your listeners that aren't already, I'd encourage you to really, assess for that. Like if you have a scorecard when you're interviewing candidates, make coachability one of those categories, because it's highly correlated to good outcomes.
You've got to spill the beans on your negotiation role play. What was it? What was that thing that you mentioned to me in the pre-chat that you love to do with candidates?
Yeah, it's really fun. So we do, it's a 3-part, it takes about an hour. The first 5 minutes is them walking me through how they would prepare for an executive level call. So the discovery, it's not a cold call. It's a pre-scheduled mock discovery call. That takes about 20 minutes. You get a sense for the types of questions do they ask? Do they have instincts around double clicking when they hear a pain point? Do they try to quantify value? Do they get some level of the project? But I don't want them to just launch through BANT right away. Right? That just sounds like an interrogation rather than a good discovery. But you can learn a lot in 20 minutes of a mock discovery. The negotiation that you just brought up is really fun. So in the role play, we fast forward 2 or 3 months into this fictitious sales cycle, and we say, your list price is $100,000. You've got discretion to go down to $70,000 to get a win, but you're $80,000 away from President's Club. And your boss, who's also on the call, is $85,000 away from his or her quota. I've done a lot of these with Yelena, by the way. So that's the scenario. And then you kick it off by saying, well, your competition, they're about the same. Very close in the scorecard. They're coming in at 50,000. So Richard, if you can lower your price to 60, I'm a reasonable guy. You can get a win today. How does that sound? Right. So you're kind of teeing up this kind of fun scenario, and people get nervous. They want to get a win. So some people race to $70,000 just to get a win, and other people sell value, and they find some middle ground, and they get a case study and a multi-year term, and all of those types of things. So again, it's an amazing process. I've done it over 100 times, and you can learn a lot in a short period of time, and it's fun. And if you do it right, even the candidate enjoys it, but it is kind of stressful.
Oh, I love that point that you just made there, which is if you do this stuff, because goodness me, the amount of times that I speak to particularly executives, but now it's becoming more at the IC level as people want to de-risk hiring. They want to get this stuff right because they've made mistakes, is they put people through like 6, 7, 8, 9 stage recruitment processes. Yeah. And they're asking people to go and produce like 180-day plans that will never get used. But if you design a good process that's challenging, that tests the old grey matter, that does create some competition, where they do get some feedback, they do get to show the things that they're best at, they come away feeling like they've learned something. That's like the best way to go and get people to go, goodness me, if I can feel this way during a process, what will it be like to work there every day? You know, like you create a buyer experience for prospects as they're like coming through the process of like, you know, buying your technology. It shouldn't feel like, oh, once you've bought, then we're going to show you like what we're really like and give you like all the love and put some really good people on this. Like treat them like they're customers from the moment they come in the door. Be a fiduciary, like to quote Jay Abraham. But so many people get that wrong and they just throw tasks at people for the sake of it. But people that have taken that level of care and time to go and work out, well, here's something that really works. Here's a formula. We've done it 100 times.
Yeah.
We enjoy it.
I love that you're bringing this up. And I can tell you that some of the candidates will say, you know what, I really appreciate the coaching that you just gave me. And I think they mean it sincerely, typically when they bring this up. And a lot of them will tell you, you know what, I don't get any coaching in my job.
There you go.
I'm just kind of left to do my own thing. And that's part of the reason why I'm open to making a change is I want someone who's going to invest in me and my career and make me better. And so sure, the primary purpose of the role play is to see how they would perform and how do they think. But it's also to let them know that like, we want to coach you. We're going to give you feedback. Feedback is a gift. We'll do it in a constructive way. We're going to make you better. And that's why I think it's a good candidate experience for those that want to learn to be coached. Like they'll see that as a good thing.
Yeah, because learning is not weakness, right? Like you talk about coachability. For me, one of the things that people miss with this sort of stuff is they just go like, well, is this person ready to take some feedback? And they go, right, let me give you some feedback. Rather than going, look, I'm going to give you some really brutal feedback now. Can I have your permission to do so? The outcome of that is that I help you to win because what I'm looking to see is this, you know? And like if you give people like a really clear, safe way of failing and they don't see learning as weakness and they don't take it as like a sort of, you know, a knock on their character or an ego hit because you're going, we literally want you to win.
Right.
You know, do we have your permission to give you brutal feedback? Then it's a completely different thing. So I totally agree. What I was going to ask,
I like the way you frame that, by the way. That's a good way to tee it up. I'll be more receptive to your coaching.
I think it's true, right? Do I have your? Because if you ask for permission, you can basically say anything, right? You know, and no one in the history of the world says, "Can I give you some feedback?" And then the other person went, "Oh, please." You're always like, "Come on, then." But you're basically going to tell me that I went wrong. You know. Yeah. There's actually in the book Love and Work by Marcus Buckingham, he talks about, there's a whole chapter about how feedback is nonsense and about how feedback is just people telling you how they would like to do it. Like, here's how you should have done it. And what he says is that you should frame things by saying, rather than saying, I've got some feedback for you, you can say, could I make an observation about my perception of how that came across?
Okay, that's good. I like that framing.
What I read into that, like, here's how that felt to me.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's the reaction I had to it rather than here's how you can go and do that things differently. And I think particularly you've grown sales teams massive, right? So when you're hiring across that sort of size of team, you've got so many different shapes and sizes of people and different characters and backgrounds and all these things that make this very diverse team. And where a lot of businesses get stuck is that they go, right, we hire people like us. Do you fit our culture? You know, and it's really like you're just hiring like you're just hiring mini-me's. And you get this like yes culture of all the same type of person, all yellow energy or red energy or whatever that manager likes, because they know it's safe. And if you're not like that, you get rejected by the culture, and you get these really horrible toxic cultures in that environment. But when you're like going, here's what we're trying to achieve, but if you've got a better way of doing that or a different way of doing that, we want to learn too. Like we're here to learn. Yeah. You know, like, and I'm just wondering. What I would love to ask you is, you've done 100 of those scenarios. What's the most memorable?
Good question. I had one that comes to mind that didn't negotiate at all, but he was so effective at sticking to his list price of $100,000. Because normally I play pretty tough in this scenario, right? I'm a CXO and I grind them and I'm able to get most people below $80,000. $80,000 is what gets them to President's Club in this scenario. It's the last day of the fiscal year, right? So it's their last deal that can get them to club. And I've had a lot of people make club on the last day or two of the fiscal year, right? Like it's a pretty realistic scenario. But one in particular stands out. Just didn't negotiate, but he sold value so well that I gave him the win at full list. So good for him.
Do you remember like a specific thing that you remember that made that so effective?
Yeah, so I would say it's almost binary. In the discovery, half the people do some level of quantification. They get a rough sense for the size of the problem that we're trying to solve. Those that do then have an advantage in the negotiation because they can say, "Oh, I understand our price is $50,000 more, but we had talked earlier about solving this $3 million problem or opportunity. And if our product is even slightly better than the competition, we're more likely to give you this $3 million outcome. And therefore the $50,000 premium is actually really small. Like, so when you frame it that way, I feel better about paying double. Double sounds terrible, but again, if it's a $50,000 gap to get a $3 million benefit, it's a great value in ROI. So I think in that one scenario, that person did a great job of reframing the value to price conversation to make me think differently about, paying double was actually, benefit to me.
Well, like my old CEO said, Brent, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Love it. Yeah. Very, very well said. Yeah.
Amazing.
Let me share one more point on feedback, if I may, Richard. So certainly you want to assess the coachability and their reaction to the feedback, but I like to start by asking them for their own feedback, their own self-assessment. So at the end of the role play, we'll ask them first. And it's pretty interesting. I would say on average, the best candidates are the hardest on themselves. Like, we'll ask them to give a 1 to 10 score and why. And the best ones will say, it's like a 7. I know I could have done better here. And like almost in real time, they know where they could have been better. And sometimes it's the weak candidates that say, I got a 9 because I got Bant, and so I would encourage you to ask them to do the self-assessment before you give your feedback.
I totally agree. Because I think that, when you talk about coachability, what does it really mean? It's growth mindset. And growth mindset starts with self-awareness. You can't possibly have a growth mindset if you're not self-aware. And I think that I talk about hiring being very simple, not easy, but simple. There's 4 types of people you can hire, and it's a mathematical equation. So I think you'll like it. Which says you have adders, subtractors, dividers, and multipliers. So adders and multipliers will grow your business. Dividers and subtractors will shrink your business in different ways and at different degrees. But adders are thinking about, like, I've done the job, I've hit my target, work is done. That's like what work means to them. That's fine. You can have a bunch of those in your team. Don't make the managers adders, because they'll never hire people who are better than them, or they'll never get those people to become the best they could be. Multipliers want to be challenged. It's like, and I do agree, this thing from Steve Jobs where he said A players want to work with A players. Like, it lifts everyone when you're working with someone that surprises everyone with the quality of thinking and work and output that they can do. When they're working with everyone else to multiply the impact, they are just driven to push themselves to completely new heights. Like, you're not having to go right in their appraisal at the end of the quarter to be like, hey, so what do you want to aim for this year? And they're like, just hit target again. They're going, right, I did 120 last year. This is about 150. Like, they're always setting more ambitious goals. They're always asking you for that next step, always asking you for the promotion, always asking you for feedback, because in their mind, like, the idea that they would be hitting a target and that's good enough doesn't even come into their mind, It's
a great framework. So you've got your questions built out to see which of those 4 types they fall into. Have you done any type of a regression afterwards to say, on average, when we assess people as a multiplier, the outcomes are whatever they are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I baked that into a thing called the multiplier hiring system. And what we're looking for is 4 characteristics that make a multiplier. So I've analyzed, I was trying to work out the numbers the other day, but because I don't come from a recruitment background, because I come from a sales leadership background, and I worked in a business for 12 years that scaled from 35 to 450 people around the world. And one of my major jobs was hiring in that environment. I must have, in my own teams, hired about 900 people. And then since pivoting into recruitment afterwards, probably another 200. So what are the patterns across all those things? And what I realized is the multipliers are people who have 4 things very strong. And it spells out the word core. So it's the core 4 characteristics. They're collaborative. So they get results through others. People love working with them, customers and internally. They're not just about lone wolf. It's we are a collaborative team trying to achieve something bigger. The O is ownership. So they are intrapreneurs acting like owners within the business, taking that level of ownership. You never have to go, hey, guy, did you think about that? It's their baby. Like, they take that much care and pride in their work. They act like owners. They think like founders. They take total ownership, unparalleled levels of ownership. The R is resourceful, particularly because we work at the earlier stage. You don't have all the resources of a massive brand. So your ability to go and take very limited resources and then go and find ways to win often you're competing against really large competitors in your space with way more resources, but you're so nimble and agile and innovative and creative that you come up with ways of solving problems. They're massive problem solvers who don't go, oh, that problem gets me stuck. They're like, that's a hurdle for us to overcome.
Yep.
And then the E is execution, because everyone's hired someone who just wants to talk about strategy all day, you know, work in spreadsheets all day, but doesn't want to actually go and execute and get stuff done. So the core 4, collaborative, ownership, resourceful, execution, we've got a bunch of questions that we use to measure how someone has been in their past, how someone has been during the process, the present, and then how someone would be in the future. So there's a whole set of questions around, here's the business challenges we're facing. How would you think about solving that with us? And the people who display excellent CORE across past, present, and future will be multipliers in your business.
Fantastic framework. I love it. If you don't mind, I might take a page out of your book on this and add this to my hiring and recruiting framework.
100%, 100%.
Thank you for listening and watching this Best Bits short. If you like this, tune in next Sunday for our next special part of our favorite episodes. And if you love the main podcast, every Thursday we introduce you to a new virtual mentor so you can hear their career story and answers to the biggest questions in tech. See you on the next episode.